I'm not a great one for vlogging or blogging or whatever you call it. But this, the story with the willow. Yeah, it definitely, I think, to me embodies the whole idea of that sometimes it's good, for something to end, for a clean break or a clean cut in this case, and sometimes not even that clean a cut. Ultimately, in order to have life, you need to have death, and things need to change. And I think my garden kind of teaches me that lesson every season. I see things dying back, and I'm always amazed by how things come back. Sometimes you have to overcome the fear of losing control, of losing something, of something dying or being taken away from you, in order to reap the benefits. Gardens teach you that there has to be a death before there can be life. Another example was that we've had these in Britain, we've had these really, really harsh winters for the past 2 years. They've come very early, they've come unexpectedly, and ultimately they've the borders have been particularly badly hit. This last one, we had such deep freezes, and we actually had sheets of ice that deep on our kitchen roof here, which pulled the gutter off the side of the house, and with it took the wooden planking. And my husband was trying to remove the gutter in order to stop the house from basically opening like a tin can, and had just literally climbed off the ladder when this sheet of ice slipped and fell on top of the ladder and basically just folded it in half. It was an aluminium ladder with the sheer weight and power of it. Had my husband still been on the ladder and the dog who was helping him been underneath it, I think, certainly the dog would have been killed. I don't know about my husband. Nature has an incredible power, and it is a good thing for me particularly, because having grown up in India, I tend to have quite a sort of I have quite an emotional attachment and also detachment from things that happen. I'm a great believer in karma, and I think that things happen for a reason, and the situation that we find ourselves in, the economy, and how things are panning out here in the UK, in Britain in general, is reflected by the things that I see around me here in the Scottish borders, and particularly in my garden. These little stories that I witness and that I observe and take on board. These little stories that play themselves out in my garden are basically just micro versions of what happens, in Britain as a whole, and also on a sort of a global scale. We are in crisis economically in the world, and Britain has its unique issues, which Britain has to deal with, and the people of Britain have to deal with. And these issues are kind of echoed in how the individual lives their life. And it doesn't matter whether you live in a city and you see shops closing, or you see rioting, these things also have a life in other realities, such as in the countryside. I mean, it's very, very peaceful here, but you know, we have issues too. The reality is that if you don't have water, you don't have life. Plants need water to survive, and you soon realize when you don't have access to water and you have a dry house that you need water not just in order to flush your toilet or to have a shower after a hard day's work. You need water in order for your body to survive. You need to drink, and when you don't have any water, your body can't, it can't exist. We are, to the largest measure, we are water. So these issues that we face on a national level and a global level, I see them reflected in some shape or form every day in my immediate surroundings. I had, for example, the harsh winter that we had, I lost my eucalyptus tree. It died because of the harsh winter, and it was about 15 meters tall by that time, and I refused to believe it was dead. When I finally made the decision that it had to be cut down, and actually approached the tree in amongst the brambles and everything, because my garden is rather overrun, much like the world and the economy and what have you. When I approached the tree, I found that it had suckered underneath it. Now, trees do this when they're under stress, and it's basically a sort of a last-ditched attempt to survive. They put out suckers. Very rarely do these suckers then turn into the tree. It's not an easy time to live in Britain. It certainly isn't. It's quite a scary time. But then I think it would be a scary time to be Greek or Italian or French or Portuguese or Spanish. It is a scary time to be, a human. I have Molly, who has had, I'm not a dog person, I'm a cat person, but I've got a Cairn Terrier, Molly, who has taught me over the last 9 years that, A, not to take myself too seriously, and B, that there are other perceptions of the same reality, because her and I live our lives, side by side. Everywhere I go, she goes. So she goes to work with me predominantly, and we're at home together. We at play together. We at rest together, and watching her and her perception, which is very, very different. And she's not a daft dog. She's a highly intelligent creature. It teaches me an awful lot about where it's not worth worrying, where it is important to trust. She teaches me this lesson all the time, that she's a very trusting creature. She has to rely on her human pack members, basically, to feed her, to water her, to let her out of the house because we don't have a dog flap. And to let her into the garden and make sure that the garden is safe and that she doesn't get run over by, a passing vehicle on the local access road. So, yeah, there you are. It's a time for having a bit of faith. I didn't want to overthink this, and I actually, believe it or not, had nightmares at about 7:45 this morning when my husband woke me, I was in the middle of a nightmare, and it was to do with filming today. And I realised that in trying to not overthink it, I was exposing myself to the panic that nothing would come to me, that I wouldn't have any ideas, that the day wouldn't unfold, that the sun wouldn't rise, and that there would be nothing for me to talk about or to try and capture with my camera. And that's it. I just didn't have faith. I didn't have the faith that the sun would rise and that the sun would shine, because last night it was raining, and I even commented on the Facebook page for Britain in a Day that I didn't think, you know, I would get the shots that I was trying not to hope I would get by not, you know, overthinking it. That I would not get the opportunity to take the camera outside because it would be raining, and cameras are, you know, don't like rain. So there you are. I needn't have worried. It's a glorious day.